Okay, we're live. Great. So welcome, everyone. Okay, thank you. Hello. Okay. All right, we'll try again. Welcome to the March Faculty Council meeting. I appreciate you being here. These meetings are getting to the point where it is very difficult to plan them in advance. Most of the agenda for today was set well in advance around people's schedules, around our guests, and yet so many things are happening every moment that I know people want to talk about, that it really is, it's getting very challenging. I know that people want to talk about things and have questions for the Chancellor and the Provost on the DEI requests that came from the General Assembly about the compelled speech policy guidelines. And so we have asked them to address those things in their comments. And you'll have our opportunity, I think, to engage in dialogue with them about that. I also want to tell you about an experience that I had this week. I was asked to join the Board of Trustees meeting and to brief them, as I occasionally am, for about 10 minutes to just bring an update from the faculty. And so on Monday, we had our Faculty Executive Committee meeting, and I asked that group what they thought I should focus on. And we identified some topics, and I prepared to do that. On Tuesday, I was made aware of an op-ed piece in the Greensboro News and Record that was authored by one of the trustees that took issue with our two resolutions from our last faculty council meeting, and took issue with the timeline that had been presented at that faculty council meeting, asserting that the faculty had already voted in the past by their participation in discussions of PPD on essentially a school of civic life and leadership. So I felt that I had to address that with the trustees, and I created a timeline to do so. That included the original email that came out from then Dean Terry Rhodes, in which she announced the formation of the Program for Public Discourse, and then the subsequent actions that happened after that, including Jay Smith's resolution to delay the implementation of the Program for Public Discourse and the vote that was taken on that resolution that failed. So this person's interpretation was that that the failure of that resolution meant that the faculty had voted A, for PPD, and B, for a school of civic life and leadership. So I gave my comments, tried to lay out the timeline, and did lay out the timeline, and then opened it up for questions, as I usually do. At that point, two different things happened. One trustee began to question me about my affiliations and activities under the political activities of state employees, because I am involved with the Coalition for Carolina. And I told him that I was not there in my capacity as a member of the coalition. And then it went from there. He did not accept that answer and continued to engage in a very difficult line of questioning, although I have done nothing wrong. So the second thing that then happened was I was accused of being disingenuous in my presentation of the timeline. Disingenuous was the word, in saying that a vote to delay, that the faculty council not accepting Jay's vote or Jay's resolution meant that we had affirmed a curriculum related program and a school for civic life and leadership. So it was, and then there was a series of activities where people were quoting from things that I wrote or quotations when I've been interviewed in the media. And I was told that I was undermining to the trustees and to the provost in particular. So it was a really very difficult experience. I did go back and checked the timeline again, and I had the good fortune to be in a meeting with Lloyd Kramer, and who was the chair, of course, at that time. And Lloyd, if you are available to maybe speak to any of this, that would be great, because I think it is really important that we understand what has happened and what hasn't. And then to also understand that this issue is not necessarily going to go away, and we are going to have to figure out how to engage in this process.
Thank you, Mimi. I'm here because I was talking with her about this, and I was chair of the faculty when we discussed the program for public discourse in the fall of 2019. I had many conversations with Chris Clemens at that time. And we explicitly discussed the fact that it was somewhat unusual to even discuss a program which was really going to be about speakers and debates. Normally, units develop those kinds of programs without faculty council involvement, but faculty council does engage when curricular changes are imposed and developed and then developed for the faculty. We made it very clear that we didn't approve, we just discussed. And we decided not to go on record as opposing it. And Chris and I talked often about the fact that this was a program to develop a public debate, public discussions. And I feel that it is a misrepresentation to say that the faculty council endorsed a curriculum plan and a strategy for implementing that plan. So I'm simply here to confirm and give my vehement support to Mimi's historical memory. I am a historian. I love historical facts, and I am here to affirm as an eyewitness to history that her timeline is correct. Mimi, thank you for representing the faculty in what must have been a difficult situation.
Thank you. I don't want this to dominate the day by any stretch. We have a lot of things to do. In that meeting, the provost went on to say that there was a committee that he has been talking with 30 different people about perhaps participating in a committee to talk about how to form this entity that the trustees would like to see formed. So I think he is available to talk to us about that. And I think we should move on with our agenda at this point. So we can start with the Chancellor, with you.
Thank you, Mimi, for your remarks. It's good to be with everyone, and it's okay if I. Thank you. It's good to be with everyone today. It's a beautiful spring Carolina day out there. It feels a little bit more like June or July than it does late March, but it's always good to be with our faculty. And I want to focus on some of what I talked about at the trustee meeting the other day, and then I will get to some of the items that Mimi's addressed. At the trustee meeting yesterday, I really wanted to talk about and highlight some of the incredible research that's happening here at Carolina by you. Many of you are world-class faculty and researchers. I talked about the way in which we have faculty researchers that are working on recycling plastics, something that's becoming, and you pick up a newspaper any given week, you're going to read about the challenges that the world is having right now with recycling of plastics, and we have some of the leaders in the world right here on our campus doing work in this space. I talked about the way that we're caring for our veterans, not just here in North Carolina, but across the U.S., as well as responding to the opioid epidemic. These are just three of many dozens that I could have picked to talk about with our trustees. And I just wanted to again, thank those, because many were not there to hear my comments yesterday, that our researchers are solving the grand challenges of our time, the way in which we not only solve the ones that exist today, but because of the way we involve every aspect of our campus, our historians, our humanists, our social scientists, natural scientists, biomedical researchers, and more, we're also identifying the grand challenges of tomorrow so that we'll be ready to solve them. And I think that's something that sets us apart and makes us unique. But the breakthroughs and solutions that will come from the work of our faculty will save lives and make the world a better place. And that's something that we need to be proud of and not lose sight of. Our research has an impact that is, again, thanks to the many teams here, and not just our faculty, but the amazing staff that run our research laboratories and more that have had challenging times over the past few years getting through the pandemic. So thanks to all of you. I just about an hour and a half ago, I had the opportunity to meet with a prospective student visiting from Tampa, Florida, with her parents. And she asked me, what is special about being an undergraduate student at Carolina? And I talked about the many lenses that I can view this campus through and that I have viewed it through, that of a faculty member, a dean, a researcher, a parent, a chancellor. And that lens through the parent lens is really special. And I've had the opportunity to talk to my own children about their experience here. One of the things that sets us apart is that those same researchers, award-winning novelists that are solving the grand challenges of our time and winning awards, are also teaching our undergraduates. That is unique to Carolina, and we shouldn't lose sight of that either. And I'm very proud of that, and that's what leads us to be the leading global public research university that we aspire to be. Yet I know there are concerns, and I want to jump to that now, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask us to please don't lose sight of all the amazing things that are happening on our campus. As I look at Barbara Entwistle, who led that office for 6 or 7 years, Office of Sponsored Research, and a lot of that important work began on your watch. I just happened to look at Barbara, and so thank you. So there are challenges, though, and we have to address these as well. I know that there are questions around the Board of Governors policy on compelled speech. And this isn't the first time that we've talked about it here in the Faculty Council, and it probably won't be the last time. But we will follow this policy. Our leadership team sent guidance out to deans, directors, and department heads last week. The provost will speak more about this issue, but I want to be clear that our commitment to the value of diversity remains unchanged. I said that in the campus message that I put out a few weeks ago. It's the first initiative in our strategic plan, Carolina Next, build our community together. If I've said it once, I've said it 100 times, that if we get that one right, the other 7 will get done, and it'll get done really well if we get that one right, building our community together. So we cannot do the work of a great university like the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, if we are not a place where people from all experiences and backgrounds can feel that they are welcome here and will contribute to the mission of this university. And I can't imagine there's anybody here that does not feel the same way. Second, we have received a request, and I know this was asked of Chris and Anita to address, a request from the Legislative Commission on Governmental Operations for an accounting of all of our diversity, inclusion, equity, and accessibility related trainings. We respond to requests like this often. And for the past 6 years, I believe, Christy, I asked Christy to check on this earlier this week. We have provided information to the system office, as all the system schools are asked to respond to this every year. And we will continue this work and led by Dr. Cox. Where is Leah Cox? Dr. Leah Cox will be by our side, and countless others will work with us to help build that community together, but also help us to respond when we are asked about requests like this. I was talking to Cameron Barwell, who I'm pointing out all these folks on our team, our Vice Chancellor for Communications. You had the chance to meet with a few meetings ago, who was just at the AAU President's meeting in DC last week, or earlier this week. And this was a topic of conversation. We are not the only university system in the country that's being asked to take an inventory of DE&I. And so we are not alone there, but I want you to hear that we as a leadership team, you as a faculty, I believe, are committed to this diverse community that makes us who we are and allows us to accomplish the great things that I talked about earlier. Third, as Mimi has already addressed, I know that the Board of Trustees proposed School of Civic Life and Leadership continues to cause concern for some of our faculty. And what I want to be clear again, and I think that many of these discussions, I believe, center around semantics. And I said this at the Board of Trustees meeting on Wednesday. I believe that the name School of Civic Life and Leadership was the first time that the vast majority of our faculty or anyone had heard of that was in the trustees resolution on January the 26th. However, I think as Lloyd has confirmed and Mimi confirmed, there have been discussions over the years with around the program for public discourse and whether there should be curriculum built around that, an expansion of opportunities to focus on promoting democracy, teaching our students how to contribute to the civic life of our country. I don't think anyone can argue that these aren't important skills, but how do we build it into our curriculum? It starts right here. And I made that very clear on January 27th in my campus message after that Board of Trustees meeting, that any curriculum development would start with our faculty, our deans, our provosts. This is the marketplace of ideas. It's our faculty. You'll help develop any curriculum around this and help to hire the faculty who would teach within any such curriculum. I know that the Ideas in Action curriculum and the program for public discourse, that there is work being done by Dean Jim White and Elizabeth Engelhardt alongside the provost. And I have full confidence in their ability to take these interesting ideas and research them, deliberate them amongst the faculty, and to build those capacities into that Ideas in Action curriculum that the curriculum called for. I, like many of you, I was upset by media reports suggesting that we would potentially be hiring faculty based on their political or ideological viewpoints. Under no circumstances would we hire faculty based on their political or ideological viewpoints. The compelled speech policy that our Board of Governors just approved prohibits it. I think I said earlier at this meeting, it put guardrails on this very thing. The provost reminded me earlier today as we were chatting, it actually prohibits it. And so, again, I think while there's concern about that policy, there are ways in which I think it helps during times of uncertainty and concerns that our faculty have. So I'm proud of the work that we're already doing to strengthen public discourse as part of our new curricular offerings, consistent with our Ideas in Action curriculum. And I think as we learn more and look for ways to, again, promote democracy, teach students how to be a part of a thriving democracy and participate actively in that thriving democracy. I think we have a responsibility to continue to look to build curriculum around this. I said this very thing on the front steps of the Supreme Court on October 31st, when I was asked by a reporter about why we have, been arguing this case, the Students for Fair Admissions case. And I said loud and clear, it's because, I've been a faculty member at Carolina for 28 years, and I have seen the educational benefits of having a diverse student body and to having those different lived experiences in the classroom that allows that curriculum to come to life. And I took it a step further to say it is our responsibility, if we are going to have a thriving democracy, that we have those different viewpoints in the next generation of leaders that will be responsible for ensuring that democracy exists. So Finally, before I turn it over to Provost, we continue to have conversations on accessibility with our students. And I want you to know that we are working really hard on this issue. We're focused particularly around our classrooms and ensuring they are accessible for all students. I've spent a lot of time with students over the past 7 to 8 months on this issue, especially over the last 4 or 5 weeks, as has Christy Hurt, who's helping to run point on this for me, so that we're taking an inventory of all the concerns that have been coming in and making sure that we can address the ones that we have funding for right now and be prepared to ask for more funding for those that we have not yet been able to address. But let's do our part as faculty as well. And I put myself in that category. I taught a class earlier this week, and I teach a class in the fall. And we have to recognize, as I've learned in some of these meetings, that some of these disabilities that students have are invisible disabilities. They're hearing impairments, visual impairments. These are when ARS, Accessibility Resources and Service, sends a notice to a faculty member, we have to be responsive to that because some of these disabilities aren't visible, as I've said, and working closely with our students. Some of what I've heard is that we as faculty have to be responsive, more responsive to those needs of students with disability. Finally, as we finish out the spring semester, I hope that you'll take the opportunity to take part in some of the incredible opportunities that a day like today allows us to do. Give UNC Day is on Tuesday. Arts Everywhere Day is on April the 14th. And before you know it, we'll be out at Keenan Stadium on May the 14th for our spring commencement with our speaker, Brian Stevenson. And I hope you'll try to be there to listen to Brian Stevenson. I had a chance back on, it was April the 16th, 2 years ago. I don't know why I remember dates, but I knew we had a faculty council meeting that day, and I couldn't be there because I was down in Montgomery, Alabama with a group of Carolina alums at the Equal Justice Initiative with Brian Stevenson. And it was an incredible day to hear from someone who's devoted most of his professional life to issues around equal justice for everyone. And we toured the lynching museum that is part of the Equal Justice Initiative, and it was very powerful. And so I asked Brian Stevenson that very day, and for those of you that don't remember, he wrote the book Just Mercy, and the movie, which was an award-winning movie, came out a few years ago. But I asked him that day, as he addressed this group of Carolina alums and myself, and Amy, my wife, was there with us, if he does commencement speeches. Now, I knew that he did. And I said, I gave him the date of our commencement for last year, this past May. And unfortunately, he was booked. He had a commencement that Saturday and Sunday, but he said, I promise you I'll do it the next year. So we were able to get Brian Stevenson here for May 14th, Keenan Stadium. I hope you'll join us there. It'll be a special day to honor our seniors and celebrate the amazing things that happen here at Carolina. So again, thank you for all that you do. I know this is even though spring break was last week, I know many of you didn't get one of those, but I hope you were able to recharge batteries a little bit. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris, and then we'll take questions at the end. Thank you.
On a sec. There we go. Sorry for the fumbling, and I have got to figure out how to print those little cards because I always have like this. Well, thank you, Kevin, for the introduction, and I want to echo your praise of our world-class faculty. I watched with pride as Professor Matthew Andrews of history presented to the Board of Trustees this week, and I have been praising your work both in public and published articles and in private meetings, and even meetings with the members of our legislature. The work you do is incredible. First, in teaching our students, not only preparing them for the workforce, but attending to their development as citizen scholars by exposing them to life-changing ideas as part of a broad liberal arts-based education. And I am pleased to teach in that curriculum with you. Your research and scholarship develops ideas and innovations that propel our economy by forming the basis for whole new industries. I had the privilege of attending the ribbon cutting for the NC Collaboratory Space on the top floor of Keenan this week, along with President Pro Tem of the NC Senate, Phil Berger, and other members of the state legislature. I want to assure you that he and other members of the delegation and everyone I speak to in the General Assembly understand the critical value of this institution and our work for the state of North Carolina. It has been my consistent vision as provost, both to advocate for you with them and to align our efforts to build North Carolina's economy with their own. Although we go about it in very different ways, we all have the health, prosperity, and flourishing of all the people of North Carolina at the forefront of our work. I said it in our first meeting and in every meeting since, this body, the legislative body of the faculty, is indispensable to the very identity of the university. It's a body that unites us, provides us with a voice, and what we do here defines the character and destiny of the university. Without it, the idea and the ideal of the university is impossible to realize. I want to thank you again for your work. And I want to tell you, I'm going to continue to remind the people of our state that what you do and what you have done, both for me and our students and for the state of North Carolina, is important, and that you do it incredibly well, reflected in our reputation as the first and the best public university in America. I'm sorry that I missed you last time. I was in another meeting. I have read the resolutions that you passed, and I've publicly thanked the chair of the faculty for her leadership in bringing clarity to the situation. And I know Dean Jim White feels the same way, and I've spoken to him. We will follow the advice contained in your resolutions. Jim, as he wrestles with how to deliver the ideas and action curriculum, and I was with faculty today and they were praising pieces of that as making a big difference for our students. And me, as I work with the Chancellor on initiatives related to democracy and civic life. And the Chancellor has asked that I use most of my remarks to address our efforts to conform to changes in the policy on employee political activities passed by the Board of Governors on February 23rd. And we have a panel of experts here who can also help if we get questions. These revisions are intended to codify the UNC system's commitment to free expression and to prohibit compelled speech. The policy prohibits compelled speech in hiring, admissions, or promotion and tenure decisions, and asks as part of that we not solicit from candidates statements that require attesting to beliefs about matters of political debate or social action as part of these processes. I want to start with you, as I did with the Board of Trustees on Wednesday, by reminding you of the language in our strategic plan under priority 1.3 of building our community together. And this is language that is not going to change in response to this changing code. It says we will prioritize diversity, equity, and inclusion in teaching, research, and service, and in hiring, evaluation, retention, and promotion of underrepresented faculty and staff. And none of that has changed. And we are not backing off of that. We will have to conform to methodologies that work with the policy. So let me tell you about the work that's been going on to comply. The Office of Human Resources has begun reviewing active searches to work with departments and schools to remove anything that might be considered compelled speech. They did not find very much. We can share numbers if you like. A website has been posted on the HR site that has sample interview questions that avoid compelled speech, and you can review those. If you can't find it, check the email that we sent out earlier in the week. There's a link. The Graduate School, and thank you, Beth, and the Office of Undergraduate Admissions, thank you, Rachel, are working to adjust any necessary admission language. And my office, thank you, LaShanya mostly, will work with schools directly to assist to any adjustments in their current practice or their promotion and tenure policies. And that work will be taking a little longer because those policies have to go to the APT and are sent informationally to the Board of Trustees. It's important to note that this policy does not impact statements or expressions that we make, expressions made by schools, units, or departments regarding our commitment to providing a welcoming and inclusive environment to the diverse populations we serve. They're about the solicitation of statements from others. Questions in the job application process or an admissions application can still ask about experience, job competencies, and skills that are measurable and applicable to serving the diverse people of North Carolina. Returning to the strategic plan, building our community together is intentionally the first pillar of the strategic plan. We cannot do the work of the university and the work of the remaining pillars, as Kevin points out, if all people do not feel that they are welcome and included. This is the most basic principle of solidarity that I have made a cornerstone of our work in the Provost's office. We will have time for questions about that. I'd like to do one last thing and then I'll be done. I'd like to return to the topic of research and innovation and update you on 3 important hires. These are hires that can help us define and expand our mission to the state of North Carolina. As you may know, we're hiring a new Vice Chancellor for Research, a new Dean of the Keenan Flagler Business School, and we're preparing to launch a search for a new Chief Innovation Officer and Executive Director for Innovate Carolina. Those first 2 searches have just finished the Zoom interviews, and we're preparing the shortlist for campus interviews. But I want to point out that the ability to think about these 3 hires together is a unique opportunity for us to reimagine the innovation landscape on campus and in our state. We will charge these new hires to rethink connections between academia and capital, between industry and academia, between government and industry, between our universities and the system, in this complex ecosphere that is the state of North Carolina. Our students are eager not only to learn in the classroom, they are ready for the experience of lab research, of entrepreneurship, of internships in business, internships in industry, and they participate in growing numbers in these opportunities for experiential education. I'm excited about the candidates who we will be interviewing for these positions, and I'm excited about the opportunity to expand and reinvigorate our role in innovation for the people of North Carolina. Thank you, and I think we can take questions. We may have to share a mic.
You need to use one of the microphones that you're talking about.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank the Chancellor and the Provost for joining us today and for your leadership in identifying some of the challenges we're facing in times that seem ever more critical every day. So I appreciate your doing that. But I have a couple of questions that trouble me. First of all, I guess, is a remark that was dropped, and I don't even remember whether it was the Chancellor or the Provost or even Mimi Conway, but I think it was the Chancellor or the Provost a moment ago, in saying that there was a committee meeting now with the Provost to discuss what kind of institution the School of Civic Life and Leadership will be. And so my question is, how can we be discussing an institution that will be definitely, after the faculty last month passed a resolution saying that we disapprove of this, and still be consistent with the notion that the faculty must vote on new schools and controls the curriculum?
You want me to?
So let me, I'm going to jump in first and then turn it to Chris. But as I said on Wednesday and then repeat it again here, I appreciate the question, but I do believe that there's a lot that is attributed to semantics here. Without question, as I said now repeatedly, the name School for Civic Life and Leadership was known to barely, no, I mean, essentially it was new. I mean, it showed up on January 26th. Having said that, we have been asked by our board to look at how we would expand curriculum out around these important topics. And There was conversations about this several years ago. I think Mimi talked about the committee that then Dean Terry Rhodes had formed. And so that's the point I'm trying to make. I think there's some confusion about what was done then. And certainly there was not discussion about a school for civic life and leadership, but there was clearly conversation around expanding curriculum. And so I'm going to turn to Chris because he has not formed a committee, but is reaching out and discussing next steps.
Yeah, so let me first address, I think there's at least 3 or 4 questions there, and I want to address some pieces of the questions that I need to reframe before I can answer. There, as Kevin says, there is not a committee. Kevin has asked me to identify people who would be willing to serve in the capacity of looking at what structure or form and effort in civic life and leadership would take. And I'm happy to share with you what I sent to a few people. It will go to many more, but what it says is not a school of civic life and leadership. It says whether it be a school, an institute, or whatever kind of. I think we have to keep an open mind at this point to be consistent with the resolution and think about what the faculty would want to do in that space. And when I say the faculty, I'm very aware there is a wide range of opinion about what the faculty think we should be doing in that space. So the answer to your question about the committee, how can there be one there isn't? Second, it will be broad participation by folks. I'm hoping to get at least 200 folks who would be interested in talking about that. And then we'll have a process for how to select and charge them. And so there has been no charge made. I think that's the important part that you're talking about. So I hope that addresses that part or those parts of your question.
It still sounds like a done deal somehow.
Well, I don't know what you mean by a done deal.
Well, I know it is not a complete 500-page report sketching out every detail, but just the way you're phrasing it makes it sound like we're bound to have this thing, and our only debate is what form it should take. And I thought we voted against it.
Well, what you voted was not, I believe the resolution, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I watched this on, it's not the same as being here. I watched it on video. And the final resolution that passed, and I hope I understood it right, but correct me if I didn't, was that we will not move forward on any such thing until the faculty have considered it. I mean, I thought the resolution was charging us to make a faculty group to study the problem, but please correct that misimpression.
I think that's misimpression.
That the conversation should be stopped until appropriate deliberation.
Right, but I'm just telling you how I'm reading it. I thought I defer to the authors.
I think both things are sort of desire to say this process needs to stop and go back to the drawing board. Yeah,
Actually, I think if we just have the text, I'm happy. I mean, I do want you to explain what you mean so that I don't misstep. But right now, all I've done is the chancellor asked me to identify some people. So I don't think we've done anything to violate the resolution by finding people to have a discussion. This is in the context of your discussion about the School of Data Science. I wasn't here for that, but I watched it. There were many discussions about data science in different groups about it, with no final decision to make a school until I was provost. And that decision was made in conjunction with Kevin in about February, March. So I had been provost a month of last year, according to what we understood at the time had been discussed, and the rules for making new infrastructure, not curriculum, but for making new structure, new bureaucratic structure.
Yeah, thank you. Mark McNeely, Business School. Yeah, when I voted on the resolution, I didn't interpret it as saying we couldn't do the school, because it was amended. And so when I read the amendment, I thought it was, we're not going to move forward on anything until we have the faculty involved in the process. So that's how I saw it as I voted on it. As far as because I teach organizational behavior and organizational structure. So to your second question, I think we also voted to do the ideas in action curriculum, especially the communications beyond Carolina part. And one thing you need to do is understand from an organizational behavior standpoint, an organizational structure standpoint, is understand what is it I'm trying to achieve? What's the mission I'm trying to do? And then what's the proper organizational structure to implement that, right? That's basic principles of organizational design. So I think once we've decided to do ideas of action, the next question then becomes, what is the proper structure to implement that, that initiative? So.
Well, let me comment on that committee. So Dean White and especially Elizabeth Engelhardt have made a committee in the college to talk about the role of PPD in the ideas and action curriculum and what structure that might take. I'm completely out of that. I've talked to them about it, but I didn't charge the committee. I haven't been to the meetings. I will say PPD was confusing to people around a particular point that has to do with the curriculum, both in the meeting referenced and now, because it always had teaching in it. It was a capacity-based program because we have a capacity-based curriculum. And that became an important point. When do you have to go, that was debated in emails you may not have seen, but when do you have to go to the curriculum committee to approve a program that's based not on a new major, degree, or even curriculum, but on teaching a capacity specifically that's in the capacity based. And our answer was when you get a class approved. And of course, the program has faculty who've gotten classes approved. So you can go back and read the original documents that were part of that deliberation around the resolution by Jay Smith. Those documents talk about both public discourse programs that model discourse and the teaching of that capacity by faculty associated with the program. So that's all there. But what was not contemplated then was a major or minor or new program of study. And I think that's what these terms, the semantics get confusing. Program does not have to mean program of study, and it didn't for this particular one. So that's my memory of where we were on that. That will get sorted out by the college faculty themselves in these committees, I hope, and communicated to us.
Carl and Mike.
Yes, sir.
I think that what might be helpful going forward is just to maybe before these sorts of things start rolling, to come to us as a body. We're here every month, like the schedule's there, or come to FEC if it needs to be sooner, and tell us that you're going to charge a committee or do whatever you're going to do or whatever it is, so that we don't find out in surprising ways. I think that's really difficult. And for us to be able to give you some perspective on what we think might be a good process for that. So I think that sometimes what's happening is that we're finding out about these things after the fact, or as I did at the trustees meeting the other day. I think most people expect that at least I would know about it. And so it's very surprising when it doesn't happen that way. So if that could be a change, that might be helpful for the next chair, whoever that might be.
Right. Well, so I just want to be sure I understand what you're saying. Surprising that you didn't know about it, but it is being that I have reached out to people to solicit interest in a committee. Is that the thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the security or finance.
Well, I mean, I think,
these are things like.
well, no one has asked, so no one has asked me to form a committee or charge a committee. He's asked me to identify people who might be interested in serving. The next step will come after we have a list of folks.
Some of which will include members of this body, of the faculty
certainly,
council,
yeah.
some of which will involve the faculty that already exist within the program for public discourse, and others who who bring expertise to this endeavor.
Yeah, and on the other one, I wasn't here last time. I had it in my remarks, but I'll say this now. It is completely appropriate for me to apologize to you at this point. It was very clumsy the way I wrote a white paper and shopped it, thinking about future opportunities, hoping there would be a chance to develop it with your participation. And then it became a media circus almost when it was in the hands of the trustees. So I'll admit to clumsiness there and bad process, and I'll hope to do better. It was as unexpected by me that it would be Well, we know the rest, so I don't need to say more, but I do apologize. That was definitely a trip by me, so.
I have just a question about the committee you mentioned. What is the timeline that's in your two heads? Like, when do you think the committee should be formed? When should be done? At least right now, what do you think is the timeline?
I have no idea.
No, agreed. And I think that the work that's being done by Elizabeth Engelhardt and Jim White and their team, the faculty in the program for public discourse, and I think the Department of Communications and others, I don't know who all Elizabeth has on that working group, but that is going to address the need, the real need around those capacities, which has to be done within the next 18 months, correct?
Yes, because we have now 40 something classes. We need many more by the time this cohort of first years are juniors. So this is the much more important work, and it's the work that's going on in the college with Jim and Elizabeth and chairs. I understand.
Were you talking on this topic?
I was going to do something here.
Okay. All right. I'm Jennifer Grassi from the School of Medicine. Thank you for your remarks and for hearing us out today. I want to bring the topic back to the compelled speech policy. And for me, the intentional ambiguity and the words that were chosen in the compelled speech policy are very challenging for us, very scary for us as physicians. Because the words were used, contemporary political debate is what is forbid. Reproductive health is not a contemporary political debate. Neither is transgender suicide. That is a healthcare problem. Racial biases in medicine are a healthcare problem. And it concerns me that leaving this policy so broad is serving as a slippery slope to narrow down what we are allowed to teach our trainees, the future doctors. I think that limiting discussions about these, and in particular, limiting our query of the people that we elect into higher leadership positions in our faculty, if we're not allowed to ask them questions about their policies and their stances on including this, I feel like this is the first step to being complicit in institutional racism. You use the term conform. We have to conform our speech to what fits to the policy, but I feel that it's being complicit.
Yeah, I appreciate the comment, and we have asked for more guidance from the system office around certain topics. I know that they have provided most recently last week.
Yeah, on Friday we did get more guidance. I don't want to tell you it had greater specificity than the policy itself.
Chris has met with the deans and is working closely with them. This isn't the first time we've heard this concern. And
in the context of this policy coming out 3 weeks to the day, I think, before that letter came requesting all this information about DEIA policies and education and trainings and who attended and how much it cost and all these things. I've circulated amongst the School of Medicine faculty to the greatest of my extent, and I got responses back saying this language is terrifying and sickening. There's comments about, you talked about us being such a premier group of researchers, and I'd like to think the School of Medicine is included in that. The vast majority of the funding in the School of Medicine comes from the National Institute of Health. The National Institute of Health, and every single trainee grant that they provide, there is a section devoted to DEI. And I've been told it was 35 pages in the last time we submitted a T32 grant. We need institutional support to continue to obtain those NIH grants. And if we can't query the people who are looking to join us, how are we supposed to fulfill that part of our mission?
Well, I don't want to accept that we can't query them. And I think this is where kind of the rubber meets the road. And we've been trying to give examples to help give clarity. So maybe I can ask you, are the examples we've given, and I know they're a very small number now on the website, are they helpful at all in that regard? Because you know, we can't cover every situation, but we can try to figure out what's allowed in terms of, you're talking about competencies in healthcare equity. as a part of a job, we can ask about those. We can ask very specific questions about those, or even general questions about those. And I think our team has been trying to make that clear with the examples on the website that were in the email. But if that's not helpful, or if we're not doing it well, please, we need to know that so we can do better. Believe me, there are a lot of folks, just as you are, trying to figure out, a policy that came to us and how to not have it shut down the things that are allowed. And that's the thing that Eric Mueller had talked about in the FEC, that the policy would have a chilling effect if you don't understand how to implement. You'll stop doing things that are allowed under the policy. So we're trying to figure out what is green lighted under the policy and give those examples. But maybe that's not working. So if you can tell us feedback on that as well.
Well, I found out about those literally on Tuesday evening. And so I think that is also part of the problem, is that it's not widely disseminated among all the schools, or at least brought down from our leadership about what sort of things were happening around the university. And that's a challenge because the School of Medicine is a large part of this university. I read the examples on the website. I personally thought it was just a lot of extra verbiage, right? It's trying to dance around the question so that we don't offend any policy. And in reality, it's just going to make it awkward for everybody. And the candidates are going to say, what are you trying to ask me? And I think that if we don't, I understand that we're still allowed to display our support of diversity and equity, inclusion, accessibility. But I think that potential trainees that come to us and interview for our residency programs and for our fellowship programs, when they're hearing all around the country everything else that's going on, and they come here and they don't get asked questions about it, I think they're going to find that very strange and be very reluctant to join our community if they're not offered a voice. And I'll stop.
Could you consider showing them our strategic plan, Carolina Next, and ask them to speak to how their presence here would help to elevate and contribute to those priorities, of which the first one is building our community together?
Yeah, I definitely think that, I'm pleased that is still part of our mission. I think that when you're sitting down and talking with a potential candidate in a very casual sort of format, because we're not doing this all as the hiring for excellence, I think that it's having to pick your words that carefully is very, very challenging.
We're in a bit of a time crunch. I've seen Eric's hand up online for quite a while. So if we can, and I know you had your hand up as well. So why don't we go to, actually, let's go to Eric, someone on Zoom, then come back to the room, if that's all right. And then we're going to probably need to move on.
Is Eric's question also about the DEI stuff, or is it? Because
Yes.
I would,
Okay, Eric.
I
Go.
have a related question that kind of piggybacks off this one.
Okay, why don't you go ahead then?
If you don't mind.
Eric.
Go ahead. So I just, it's hard not to interpret the recent demand that we turn over everything having to do with diversity, equity, inclusion, and then every other word that you can associate with that, as well as this compelled speech policy as anything but an assault on diversity. And I feel like this assault is happening all the way from the level of boards of trustees up to the Supreme Court of the United States. And I was very proud, Chancellor Guskowitz, when you wrote that op-ed defending our practices and our race-conscious practices for admissions. And I was proud when you stood in Washington in solidarity with our university council to really make that case. That was a moment for me where I felt like my chancellor had my back. So I want to thank you for that. With these other policies, I don't feel that way. What I feel like is we're being given mixed messages, and we faculty are being torn in different directions. So we're being told, as you've said today, and you said it in your, and it's stated, as you said, in the strategic plan, we value diversity. We value having a diverse, inclusive environment, and yet we can't ask candidates about it. And we're being told that we want to support you doing workshops and trainings and doing all these great initiatives to really kind of, to really address some of these issues. But yet, on a moment's notice, you have to drop everything and you need to kind of report everything you've done for the last 4 or 5 years about this and turn it over within 3 or 4 or 5 days, which is what happened to us. And I just want to point out that this is, in addition to really kind of, I feel concussed by the barrage of assaults to the head, to put it in language that I know you understand, Chancellor, by this, I feel like, in addition to my colleague's point just now, that it's actually impeding our ability to do our job, where we came here to do all the great research, all the great service and teaching that you both highlighted, that we are so proud of, is actually, it's impeding upon our ability to do this and to do our jobs every day, because we have this kind of constant assault on our ability to do what we do best. And we've been having searches in the history department, and I can't tell you how many candidates have asked us about the Board of Governors. I can't tell you how many people have said, what is this thing about where you need to turn over all your workshops on DEI? And this is not only going to impact people wanting to stay here, as you pointed out, but it's going to impact our ability to recruit and retain the very diverse faculty that our strategic plan claims to value. And so I just wanted to point that out to you so you could be aware. And I just want to ask if you would, be able to give us more guidance, because you're talking about how you're giving guidance to like the different offices of HR and stuff on how to comply with this. But can you give us guidance on how to still maintain those values that we all share? Can you give us guidance on how we can actually maintain that excellence through diversity and inclusion?
Thank you.
So this is a big topic, and we have so much today that what Jill and I have been talking about is if we can figure out another date very soon to sort of have more of a town hall where people can have more free form discussion over these things, inviting the Chancellor and the Provost. So if that is okay with people, I would like to try and move us along. Would that be all right? Eric, you were going to speak, but I'm feeling like we've just got to move along. We do have our executive committee meeting a week from Monday, so that might be a time where we could open up and actually try and find an in-person room and ask people to come together.
Mimi, are you suggesting that we just end the Q&A portion entire, or just move to a different topic? I'm a little confused.
I think that we have to, if we're going to have any part of our agenda complete today. And we do need to hear from our candidates for chair. We have guests here that have been on the agenda for months. So, as I said at the beginning, it is hard to plan an agenda these days because there's always something breaking. Yeah.
Can I just quickly phrase something in the form of a statement then, rather than phrasing it as a question, sort of like the inverse of Jeopardy?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say that as I understand it, our elected representative, the chair of our faculty, was rather savaged publicly in a committee meeting of the Board of Trustees yesterday. And I just want to make the statement that and I know many others very much support our elected chair and feel the injury ourselves as faculty members, and very much hope that our leadership, our Chancellor and our Provost, will take the opportunity to stand up for us when we are questioned and brutalized in that way. That's it. I'm done.
Thank you, Eric. And I think that is something to think about as we welcome folks that are considering this role. So, Mark, I'm sorry, we're going to have to move on with the agenda.
Okay, different viewpoint, it's fine.
So we have two fantastic people who are standing for election for chair of the faculty. I think it's great to be in a position where there are two right answers. So I would invite them to come up and share their points of view with you. Would one person like to start? Tom, you're close. Okay. I want to introduce Tom Kelly, professor in the School of Law.
Click this on or how should we do this? Whatever I want to do, right?
Yeah.
I'll try clipping. I typically prefer to speak extemporaneously, but they tell me I have 4 minutes. And so I have a script that I'm going to stick to. So good afternoon. I want to begin by thanking Mimi, our current chair of the faculty, for her strong, level-headed leadership in a time of recurring crises. Everyone knows the chair of the faculty is a difficult job, but Mimi could not have foreseen what she was stepping into, and she's handled herself with an admirable combination of grit and grace. So thank you. I also want to acknowledge, not my opponent, my counterpart, Beth Morocco. I would almost certainly be voting for Beth if I were not a candidate for this position myself. Beth and I both served earlier in our lives in the Peace Corps, and I don't think it's a coincidence that the two people who have stepped forward to serve as the chair of the faculty at this difficult time in our university's history both served their country and the cause of peace in the Peace Corps. So thank you, Beth. Sorry, told you I don't like notes. Okay, a few words about what I would bring to the position of chair of the faculty. First, if you ask my colleagues and friends, they will tell you that it's my habit to listen carefully and to reflect before I speak. In my view, an essential role, one that has been modeled by Mimi, of the chair of the faculty, is to listen to the faculty and the rest of the community, and to understand their concerns and their aspirations, and to amplify their collective voice. I think I am temperamentally well suited to those tasks. Second, I'm a lawyer, and many of the crises we have experienced, and I fear will continue to experience, are legal in nature, or at least have significant legal dimensions. To offer one example, what I just assume is an anti-DEI policy recently adopted by the Board of Governors will almost certainly, I assume, be challenged as unconstitutional because it is. It will be helpful as part of that struggle to understand the legal aspects of it. To offer another example, the Students for Fair Admissions case will probably be handed down within the next few months, and it will very likely eliminate race-conscious admissions. It will require careful rethinking and strategizing to find new ways of creating and maintaining diverse, equitable, and inclusive learning community at Carolina. And legal analysis will be an important aspect of that future struggle. Third, a third characteristic that I would bring to the position of chair of the faculty. I am old. I am a tenured professor. I am toward the end of my career. I'm not seeking promotion. I'm not hoping for a different job. What that means is that I can say whatever I think needs saying and be reasonably confident that those inclined to punish faculty members for speaking out, I would point to my colleague Eric Muller as a prime example, won't easily be able to harm me. Fourth, I have broad and deep experience at UNC-Chapel Hill. I began my career as a fixed-term professor, so I understand the frustrations of what can sometimes feel like a second-class citizenship. I've been a tenure-track professor, so I understand the challenges of balancing teaching and scholarship and service and the rest of life. Sorry, got to turn the page again. I've spent years in administrative positions, and so I have firsthand knowledge of how talented and hardworking our staff members are and how underappreciated and undercompensated they are. In 20 years of supervising UNC School of Law's Community Development Law Clinic, I've worked collaboratively with scores of community groups in our state, so I understand why our university is not always viewed as a savior, even when we are trying our best to do good. Finally, I've served on many university-wide communities over the years, including a brief stint on the faculty council many, many years ago. I lost the election, but the person who won had to go elsewhere, and so I stood in. Anyway, because of all this committee service, I have at least some insight into what goes on behind the curtain at Carolina. And now the fifth and final reason that you might want to consider me for this position of faculty chair. Although, as I said, Beth is great too. It's that I am completely invested in this institution and I am desperate for it not to fail. If it sinks, my family and I will sink with it. I made my entire academic career here at Carolina. My spouse is a professor, along with Beth, at the Gilling School of Public Health. All three of my sons are graduates of the college. One of them is in the law school now. It makes me, by my count, a sextuple Tar Heel, and it means that I am all the more motivated to strengthen this institution and to help it survive and thrive into the future. Thank you.
Yep. And hold back button. Okay.
Well, thank you. Can everyone hear me? Thank you for your time. I don't know if you know this, but we don't know who the person that we're running with, I'm going to say instead of against, is until everybody else does. And so the minute we saw that, we got emailing each other and saying, well, no matter what happens, there'll be a return Peace Corps volunteer as president, as chair of the faculty. And I will tell you that what you do learn in the Peace Corps is that nothing is predictable and that you have to figure things out. Right? So I think that those are qualities that Tom and I both share. I happen to be a Tar Heel triple threat, so I don't know if that's the same thing as a sextuplet, but I'm a Carolina alumna, I'm a faculty member, and a Carolina parent, like Kevin. So I have deep chosen ties to this university. I chose to come here because Carolina is the people's university, and also because of its excellent academic reputation. I chose to stay here as a faculty member because of just the vast opportunities to be involved in engaged scholarship. The research opportunities here are phenomenal. And that Carolina has an explicit commitment to service, which that combination of academic excellence and commitment to service is very rare. You don't see that in many institutions. And then I was thrilled that my son chose to do his undergraduate work here, and that both my son and daughter will be starting graduate school here in the fall. I should say I'm also thrilled with in-state tuition. So, and I know that they will both be acquiring knowledge and critical thinking skills in an environment that encourages them to put those tools to service to their community. All of those aspects of Carolina are worth celebrating, protecting, and enhancing. So I was honored to be nominated to run for chair of the faculty, and I accepted that nomination with, I think, a healthy degree of trepidation. Maybe from today's meeting, you understand why. But I should say, I also believe in faculty governance. I think it's critical to and essential to preserve academic freedom and integrity. I also bring some things to the table, some similar and some a little different from Tom. I believe that my academic training in public health, the leadership roles that I've had at multiple levels of the university, my experience developing and implementing academic programs, and my bridge building temperament is how I'll put it, uniquely equipped me to serve as the chair. In public health, we emphasize prevention, data-driven decision-making, a population-level focus, and promoting equity. And all of those things are integral to good faculty governance as well. Too many of our recent discussions have not been informed by data, but instead have relied on rhetoric and I think largely inaccurate perceptions. So my 15 years, I think now at Carolina has been infused with service. This is actually my third 3-year stint on the faculty council. I just keep coming back for some reason. And I served on many other committees, task forces, searches. I'm actually on the search committee for the new vice chancellor for research at the university, the school, and the department levels. And I was honored to be selected for the Edward Carey Graham Award for service in 2021. I served as the director of our department's Masters in Public Health program for 8 years. And during that time, I participated in a graduate program review, 2 school reaccreditations, and the creation of new graduate degrees. So apropos of our discussions today, I have extensive knowledge in how academic programs are developed, vetted, approved, and institutionalized. And it's a very complex multi-phase process. In my role as the Associate Director of the UNC Injury Prevention Research Center, which is an interdisciplinary center that's under the auspices of the Office of Vice Chancellor for Research, I've learned the ins and outs of the research enterprise here at Carolina, which, as you've heard, is a gigantic enterprise that it comprises almost $1.2 billion. And it provides myriad learning and funding opportunities for our students, and contributes to cutting edge discoveries that make the world a better place. Finally, I'm a bridge builder as well, and that's partly because I have to be. I'm an applied public health researcher who focuses on violence prevention in my work, including gender-based violence and gun violence. And so I'm no stranger to difficult conversations about sensitive and also often controversial topics. I can almost always find that little sliver of common ground to at least start the discourse, and I will bring that to the table as well. As a mixed methods researcher engaged in participatory research, I bridge the gaps between quantitative and qualitative and research and practice on a regular basis. So over the next 3 years, we will undoubtedly encounter disruptions. We are still experiencing the disruption of the pandemic, challenges and opportunities. As chair, my priorities will be to protect, continue, and enhance our efforts toward building an inclusive, equitable environment for Carolina's faculty, staff, and students, and to safeguard the integrity of the role of faculty in decision-making, and to advocate for the full and timely information sharing in matters that concern our faculty. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to let you know who I am, and I look forward to talking with you. I think we have a meet and greet on the 4th. Right? Yes. Oh, that's all your sweater. All right.
We have a wardrobe issue.
I know, it's a wardrobe malfunction here. There we go.
Yes, there will be a meet and greet with both candidates so that you can get to know them better on Tuesday, April 4th from 3 to 4:15 in the Ann Queen Faculty Lounge. So please put that on your calendars and we'll send out a message as well. So you, as a reminder. Next, we have long wanted Dawn Osborne Adams and Elizabeth Hall to join us. Dawn from the Ombuds office and Elizabeth Hall from the EOC compliance office. I don't know whether I have that name right, but I'm hoping so. And I think LaShanya, you are here as well in case there are pieces that come up from the Provost's office, who does enough, and LaShanya does a lot with personnel matters. So I think what we wanted to do, the reason that I thought about this in the fall is just, things do come up for faculty, and a lot of people don't always understand A, the resources that are available to them, and B, how and why these processes work the way that they do. And so we reached out to Elizabeth and to Dawn to have some conversation and to just bring this to the table. So however you all would like to do it. Okay.
So how much time do we have?
This is always a problem.
Because I have too many slides. That's like my brand nowadays, is I always show up with too many slides. So I want to try to move through my slides as quickly as you need me to.
Yeah, I mean, if we could maybe. And then maybe have a few minutes for questions. Think that'll work? Prayerfully. Okay. Let's get started and see how.
Okay, I'll move quickly.
Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dawn Osborne Adams, and I am the director of the Ombuds Office and the University Ombuds. And it's likely that some of you do not know what that means, but you will by the time I finish talking today. You see that this slide here says the Ombuds Office is a resource for navigating challenging situations. Often people think about the Ombuds Office in terms of a place that's here for conflict resolution. We think of it much broader than that anybody on campus who's facing a challenging situation can come to the Ombuds Office and get help. Part of the reason I have so many slides is that I use the same slides for everyone we talk with because we offer the same services to everyone on campus. The way we engage with people, the way we provide access to people does not change based on their status at the university or what group they belong to. So these are the same slides I use with the employee forum, the same slides I use with senior leadership, and very similar to the slides I used earlier this week with our postdoctoral scholars. And I think they apply for faculty just as well. Next slide, please, Elena. Thank you. So I'm going to talk about the who, what, and the how, so the operational pieces of the office. And then next I'll talk about the why. Why would a university have an Ombuds Office will be what I'll end with. Next slide. So I think the people are the most important part. So I'm going to start with that. That's me, as you see. And then our associate ombuds is Josh Canzona, who's somewhere watching. And I'm going to say this, Josh is an excellent ombuds. He's fantastic. He's a new addition to our office. I've been here since 2018. Josh joined us in 2021. And a faculty member recently said to me, my conversation with Josh changed my life. So I do the best I can, but Josh is fantastic. Victoria Dowd has been with our office, has been with the university almost 30 years. She's been with our office since our office was created in 2005. And she's what I call the heartbeat of our office. She keeps us together. She will be the first voice you hear if you call our office, the first person you see when you walk in the door, and she's an indispensable part of our team. You see some other pieces there, all of which are important. The one I will highlight is that we are free and voluntary. So central to the Ombuds Office is the idea of agency and self-determination, and that voluntariness is part of it. Okay, next slide. So this is our mission statement, which I'm going to talk about each of the three paragraphs. I think it provides a good way to frame our services. And then I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about our ethical principles. The first paragraph is really about jurisdiction. So it says that any person can come to the Ombuds Office with any issue. Any person, any issue, there's only one other place on campus that has no jurisdictional limits, and that's the Chancellor's office. Everywhere else is either limited in terms of who can come or what they can bring. So think we have a very broad scope, pan-university, similar to Elizabeth's office in that way, but their office is limited in terms of issues. We're committed to ethical ombuds practice, and we create and cultivate an environment where people can deliberate about whatever is important to them and do that hopefully with candor. You cannot address a problem that you can't speak openly about. And there are a lot of disincentives within an organization to just saying everything that's on your mind. These ethical standards we're confidential and informal, and we are independent and impartial. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what those mean. And then finally, we don't just do consultation with individuals and groups. We also do some education in our community. We facilitate discussion between and amongst people. We host quiet conversations in our office with people who need to talk about things they maybe would not be able to talk about, but for a designated neutral sitting with them to help them discuss those things. And we try to influence fair process, constructive communication, people approaching conflict in a way that is thoughtful and intentional, and we try to impact our campus climate as we can. Next slide, please. The reason we are able to operate the way that we do, which is very unique on campus, is because the university has made a commitment to us being able to follow the standards of practice and code of ethics of our professional association, which is the International Ombuds Association. Next slide. Okay, I'm gonna talk a little bit about what these words mean because I think they're important. They are what help us create that container for people who come to our office to meet with us. Confidential in this context means unless we think someone's in imminent risk of being hurt, then whatever they say to us is going to stay with us unless we agree that we should share it with someone. So there's very few exceptions. We are not a responsible employee, so we don't have an obligation to report to Elizabeth's office or to any other office. We don't have an obligation to report violations of university policy. It's intended to be a wide open lane where people can say almost anything. It allows people to be hopefully more transparent and more authentic in their communication with us, and to be able to share the pieces about their contributions to whatever they're talking about that they might not share in a different form, be able to work through that. We're informal, so we are not a place where you come to report things, also different from Elizabeth's office. We're often helping people think about, is this something I want to make the university aware of? And if so, how would I do that? How would I frame the issue? We don't keep records. It's intended to be a no strings attached encounter where people can come. They don't have to worry that there's going to be documentation. We'll help people figure out how to document if they want to, but record keeping is not a part of our process. And then this last piece is probably the reason that I do this work. People retain control over their situation. People get to decide what, if anything, they're going to do next. Next slide, please. The reason we're able to operate in that very distinct way is because we're independent and we're impartial. Independent's not the word that I would have chosen if I was choosing these words, but I didn't choose them. And so what it means is we are structurally independent from the rest of the university except for the Chancellor's office. So our connection to the university is through the Chancellor's office for administration and budget. And we are really operationally autonomous. I think we earn the trust that is placed in us, and we take it very seriously. We're also impartial. That means that our job is to stay in the middle. You all, if anybody who's heard me talk has heard me say, I have an opinion literally about everything. In this role though, my job is to be in the middle. It is to not have a personal stake in the outcome and to help people think about all the interests at play in a given situation. Okay, so all that's great, but what do you actually do? So these are some of the things that we do in our office. We do a lot of listening. I have a colleague who says the ombuds hear people into voice. I very much believe that. We do a lot of coaching. We help people think through very tangled up situations often. Sometimes people want the perspective of somebody who has the benefit of distance, who just simply is not in it. We can get information for people without them having to present themselves to ask for that information about policies, those sorts of things. And like I said before, we sometimes engage in facilitation. We give feedback to the organization. So when we hear either a pattern or insights that might relate to one single thing, we will provide feedback to the place that we think has the decision-making rights and the will to move whatever that issue is forward. And finally, that last bullet point is a bit of a nod to my late colleague, Lori Bezabov, who would always say that we celebrate good news. We are not just, a place of doom and gloom. Okay, next slide. There's some things we don't do. All of this autonomy that we have and all of this discretion, what we give up is we don't make decisions for anybody, for the institution or for individuals. We can't tell people what to do. I already said we don't take notice for the institution. It's not a place to file formal complaints. We don't investigate. So we don't investigate and I'll skip down 2 bullets. We don't adjudicate. We don't decide who's right and who's wrong. If that's something that someone wants, we help them figure out whether they might get that and where. I am a lawyer by first career, but I don't give legal advice and we don't provide counseling. And we do not act as advocates for individuals. So we're not going to be with an individual charging up a hill to get them what they want. We will sit with a person to understand what they want and try to present them with the array of options that might get them there. Okay, next slide. So this is what to expect. If a person or a group came into the Ombuds office, because I know some of the question here was about process. this is what would happen. You would have to listen to me say some of what I just said over again. And then I would also talk about, how we would use our time together. And then we would take as much time as was needed for me to understand the story, for me to understand what the challenge is, all the nuances, all the details. Some of the benefit of what we have is we have time that others on campus don't. We have the luxury of being able to sit with people and listen for as long as it takes. Then we help people frame the issue. Often people come with an outcome. I'm here because I want to file a grievance. They haven't really formed the issue. They haven't thought about what's actionable in this, and they haven't thought about what's most important to me. So we help people think about that. We help them articulate a goal. You'd be very surprised how often people will say, we'll be talking about actions. And if I say to them, where are you trying to end up? People will say, I haven't really totally thought about that. We help people articulate a goal, think about the options, and then they are left with a decision of what, if anything, they're going to do. Next slide, please. So these are some of the types of concerns that come into the Ombuds office. I'm not going to read through them all. I think the ones that I will highlight are preparing for challenging conversations. I think there's a perception that the Ombuds office is the place you go when everything has just gone to, I can't think of the right synonym, gone to you know what. And yes, that's true. But the Ombuds office can also be the place where you come where you're not quite sure if you have a problem or you want to try not to have a bigger problem. So we help people sometimes prepare. The Ombuds, if you just go back, there's the other thing I would say is request for thought partnership. That's something we enjoy doing, is people coming and just taking an issue, a policy, something they're planning to do, and just talking it through with us, again, to get a distant perspective. Okay, I'm ready for the next one. Ombuds help build capacity. These are just some workshops that we do. Sometimes we'll work with, usually by request, with a group of people who want to build some capacity in terms of conflict management and engaging in conflict in a healthier way, or communication skills. This top one, Introduction to the Ombuds Office, I do want to say that the best way I think to reach faculty is to be in the department with people, to show up even very quickly, to talk with them. And that is something we are willing to do with some advance notice for any department. Okay, next one. So why? This is a story best told in pictures. So I'm gonna use a few pictures to talk about this, and I promise you I'm almost done. So this represents the idea that people have experienced things very differently, right? We have the exact same situation, and often people in the Ombuds office, we talk to one person, and then we talk to the other person, and we'll be wondering, were they in the same place at the same time? And so the Ombuds office exists as a place that may not bridge those differences, but will help people understand them, and is able to acknowledge also these different perspectives. Next slide. So this is how everybody comes to the university wanting their experience to be. If I'm a student, faculty member, staff member, I come thinking that my role on campus, my experience on campus is going to be orderly, right? It's going to be orderly and beautiful. And next, if you just hit the advance, and often this is what that ends up being. Not often, but sometimes people run into this. And the Ombuds office is the place where you can go and we will help you find the end of that yarn. We will help you figure out how to pull on it so it doesn't get tighter. I cannot promise you that we will unravel it, but we very much believe that part of our goal is to help people get back to the reason they came here. No graduate student comes and says, I'm going to go and to Carolina, it'd be really cool if I was in some intractable conflict with my advisor. Everybody wants to be successful. And so we try to help people get back to being successful in what they came here to do. And then finally, I don't know if hopefully you all can see this, but everybody on campus is not equally situated. And so everybody cannot speak maybe as freely. Everybody can't see the suffering maybe that others are experiencing, or the challenges or problems that others are experiencing. And everybody can't see necessarily even the challenges of that big fish there. And so the Ombuds office, I think, is a place that tends to all three of those fish, maybe helps them understand each other a little bit better, and certainly empowers all of them. This is the last substantive thing I'm going to say, and I think this is important as the framework that we often use in our office. Every problem can be solved in one of these three ways: through interest, through rights, or through power. Interests are the reason we want things. Interests are what's driving us, what is most important to us in a situation. And that drives us, that drives our behavior, that drives the way we problem solve. Rights are entitlements. So rights are, I'm going to go somewhere and I'm going to solve this based on rights and say, I'm entitled to this outcome, to a rights-based outcome. Elizabeth will talk about the rights-based outcomes available in her office. Power is the ability to make somebody do something. And that power could come through authority. That power could show up in other ways. Activism is a form of power, the ability to coerce somebody to take some action they don't want to take. I show this because the Ombuds Office is here to help people engage in interest-based processes. In those instances where we can all find a way forward together, we're also here to help people think about when they need to access rights-based processes or want to, and the ways in which their own and others' power might help them move towards their goals. But these are all interdependent and work together. And the Ombuds Office is part of this ecosystem where all three of these things exist. I say this for two reasons. One is, well, I'll say it for one reason. One is, sometimes there's a desire to say, go to the Ombuds Office and mediate it. The Ombuds Office doesn't operate in a vacuum. It operates in this, kind of complex sphere of interest, rights, and power. And so I would ask anybody to think about, before you send something to the Ombuds Office to be mediated, where power plays in, where rights may play in, and how the Ombuds Office can help beyond mediation, but in some of the ways we've talked about in terms of helping with general navigation of addressing issues in our community. Next slide. This is my last slide. And so this is a student wrote this about the Ombuds Office after coming and using our services. And I think she just said it so well that I use those words to end most presentations. And it's, I think, also a testament to the students here in their brilliance. All right. Do you want me to take questions now?
Maybe after Elizabeth, could we do that together? And I just
Quickly, I will just say that Dawn is a wonderful thought partner. I have had the pleasure of getting together with her from time to time just to talk, and it has always been very enriching and enlightening to me.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Elizabeth Hall. I'm the Associate Vice Chancellor for the Equal Opportunity and Compliance Office, and I'm also the university's Title IX Coordinator. The Equal Opportunity and Compliance Office, or the EOC, does a lot of things, but I'm going to focus primarily on the sort of interpersonal services that we provide today as we're talking, and we can go to the next slide. And what I mean by that is that we address protected status, discrimination and harassment, sexual misconduct, interpersonal or relationship violence, and stalking. I'm going to really dig into that piece. We also provide accommodations based on disability, religion, and as of June 28th, 2023, pregnancy for employees after a recent congressional act in December. I'm happy to talk about that, but I'm really going to focus on the first bullet point today, so we can move to the next slide. So our policies in the EOC prohibit discrimination and harassment based on protected status. Those are the 13 protected statuses that you see there. As a part of prohibiting sex-based discrimination, we also prohibit sexual harassment, sexual assault or sexual violence, and sexual exploitation. Our policies also prohibit related misconduct, relationship violence, so domestic violence is a more common term, stalking, and retaliation. And before we dig into definitions and process, I want to say a couple of things that are sort of the guiding principles of the EOC's work. First, we are a neutral office. So that means that in our administration of the policy, we are charged with determining whether conduct has violated the policy and whether actions run afoul of our requirement to engage in a non-discriminatory, non-harassing manner. We do that in a lot of ways, but primarily through investigations, which means that we have to be neutral as between the parties who are coming to us with a complaint and make a careful inquiry guided by the facts and the evidence that we gather as to whether there has been misconduct, whether there has been discrimination or harassment. That does not mean that we don't care about the people that we're working with. And I'm going to talk a lot about the resources that we provide as folks go through our process, which we know can be difficult because it is designed to address difficult things. Our work is also guided, if not entirely, then primarily by federal law. So we have many layers of federal law at play here: law, regulation, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, Title IX regulations, the Office of Civil Rights within the Department of Ed. There are a lot of compliance factors that we are navigating through that dictate how we do much of our work. And so I think it's important just to keep that as sort of the framing backdrop for much of this conversation. So I'm going to focus primarily on talking about discrimination and harassment, not because I don't think the sexual misconduct portions of our work are important, but because I think the sexual misconduct, sexual assault definitions are a little bit more intuitive. And some of the discrimination and harassment definitions are where folks tend to have more questions. So I'm going to focus there, but I'm happy to talk about anything that's on the slides. So this is the definition of discrimination as defined under our policy. This is what's prohibited. So it's a distinction, preference, or detriment that's based on protected status, that's serious enough to unreasonably interfere with someone's access to or conditions of employment. I'll just speak to the employment piece. I think what's really important here to note is that discrimination has to be based on protected status for the EOC to be able to address that behavior. I think there's a lot of behavior, there's a lot of distinctions, preference, or detriments that can be based on other things. Academic disagreements, personal dislike, general favoritism, those things all make working together difficult and are things that need to be addressed. But the EOC is not the office that can address those things if the behavior is not based on protected status. We will happily help you find our partners in the Provost office and the Ombuds office who can help you work through those things. We can go on to the next slide. We had skipped this one. So the other definition I'll sort of talk us through is prohibited harassment. So this is a type of discrimination that occurs when any sort of conduct based on an individual's protected status interferes with their work, their participation in university programs or activities, or their access to our services. And there's two types of harassment. The first is quid pro quo harassment. And this is what I think of when I think of those commercials that were on in the 80s. Stop, this is sexual harassment and I don't have to take it. This is your boss requesting sexual favors in exchange for a promotion or a raise, tit for tat, some behavior in exchange for something that you are entitled to otherwise in the scope of your employment. And we'll go to the next slide and talk a little bit more about hostile environment harassment, which I think is much more commonly reported, but also perhaps a little bit more difficult to understand. So this is generally going to be a pattern of unwelcome conduct that's based on protected status, that's so severe, persistent, or pervasive that it alters the conditions of your employment and creates an environment that a reasonable person with similar circumstances and similar identities would find hostile, intimidating, or abusive. So I think there's a couple of key things to pull out of this definition that further define EOC's scope. So again, the first thing is that it does have to be based on protected status. So, again, this is a place where you may have academic disagreement, personal dislike that is motivating a pattern of behavior. That's not within our scope. That severe, persistent, or pervasive is also important. Generally, a single incident is not going to be prohibited harassment. Generally, a comment every couple of years over a period of time that's spread out is not going to be enough to meet this standard. Still bad behavior, still things that we want to address, but not within the policy's definition. The other thing that we have to think about is that reasonable person standards. We have to look at, would someone objectively viewing this conduct believe that it meets these standards? So some limitations in terms of our scope are woven into the definition. Again, I think when you engage with our office, you may hear us say, we're not, our options are limited because we don't meet one of these definitional components, but that doesn't mean that we don't want to help you find a way to address that behavior. So we can go to the next slide. So I want to talk through what happens if you come to our office to report that you've experienced misconduct. You think you might have experienced misconduct. You want us to tell you if it meets these definitions. First step is that we have a team of report and response coordinators. We have a team of 4 folks whose whole job is to receive reports, spend as much time with folks as they need to tell us why they think the behavior falls under the policy, to tell us what it is they need to have addressed in the workplace to allow them to continue having a positive experience here in spite of the behavior, tell us their concerns about about addressing the behavior, about engaging in a formal process. So the first step is that, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but so the first thing that you as the individual who's making a report will receive is you will receive an outreach email from our report and response coordinators. They're going to offer to meet with you to have that in-depth conversation, find out what you want to do, tell you what options are, offer to explore that with you. They're also going to offer you a whole host of confidential other resources that you can start with if you don't want to engage with our office. We still want you to know where else you can go. And then you'll have the opportunity to meet with our report and response team, explore what options may be available, let us know what you want to do, let us know what resources you may need, all of that. In the background of all of that, we are also assessing what you've shared with us. Is there an immediate concern for violence? Is there an immediate concern to the physical safety of the university? Is there something that we need to address right now? And loop in campus partners. So I think I really want to focus on the last column here. We try as much as possible within our requirements to respond in the best interest of the campus, to follow the individual person's lead in how we address situations. When someone makes a report to our office, when someone makes a report as a responsible employee and shares information about someone else, it's up to the person who is impacted whether they want to respond to our email, our invitation to meet. It's up to them whether they want to talk to us, whether they want to tell us more. They may not want to. And it's important that we respect their autonomy as the person who's had the experience to decide what they want to do with that. If someone does come and talk with us, we try very much to respect their autonomy in deciding what they want us to do with the information that they've shared. There may be circumstances where we have to move forward to address misconduct because of the risks to the campus community. But if someone is telling us, I want to tell you this, I don't want you to initiate an investigation against someone because I don't have enough power in this situation to be certain I won't be retaliated against. I fear for my career. We're going to consider their perspective and identify other ways that we can address the behavior that may be less obvious and less public to folks around them. Next slide, please. So I sort of put our response options to concerns of any prohibited conduct in 3 buckets. One is what we call an informal resolution, which is not a great title because it doesn't really suggest that something's happening when I actually think this is mostly what people want and can be very successful. And this can look a lot of ways. It can be any of the things in this column, or it can be all of them together. It could be providing supportive measures to the person who had the impact and nothing more. That may be all they want, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that is. It may be an educational conversation where with the accused individual, where we say, we've received this report. We're not saying that this happened. We're not making a judgment about that, but we want you to be aware that this conduct was experienced as potential discrimination and harassment. And we want to see if there's a path forward for this relationship. What tools can we give you to navigate going forward? It could be training for the whole department or unit. We also have the option to do a more formal facilitated agreement between parties as far as how their interactions will move going forward. But the key to this response path is that it's non-disciplinary. So if an individual wants us to go this route, there's not going to be any discipline for the person who's accused of engaging in the misconduct. The formal resolution path is that formal investigation of whether there has been misconduct that violated the university policy. We have a team of trained investigators. We provide everybody involved a lot of notice so they know what they've been accused of, they know what their rights are, they know what their appeal options are, and discipline can be a potential outcome of that process. The other bucket is the referral. So if it doesn't pose a potential policy violation, it's raising other policy concerns, someone else needs to know about it. That's when we're going to connect folks to Dawn's office, the Provost's office, other areas on campus that may be able to help. So go to the next slide. All right, this is my last one. I can finish here. So I'm really going to just talk about this first row here. So when folks come to us for supportive measures, I think a lot of those in common knowledge are geared more towards students, but there are a lot of things that we can do for faculty and staff. No contact orders, directing folks not to have contact with each other, changes to work location, schedule, or assignments to navigate a challenging situation with interactions, helping manage workload or deadlines if the situation is impacting folks. So those are some overall examples. We always dig in with the individual person about what may help and what may be supportive. So I will pause there.
We have about. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, good. So we have about 10 minutes left in our meeting. And so what we'd like to do is post Dawn and Elizabeth's slides and offer you the chance to engage with them. Their contact information is there. And just to recognize, I think that whatever office you call, and likewise, if you were to call LaShanya Thompson in the Provost's office, that there are people that can get you to the help that you need. So you don't have to know what the right answer is. You call one, you might end up at the other. So, I think the other thing that's really important to me is their processes work the way that they do for very good reasons, even though sometimes that is really, it can be challenging, particularly I think the timeframes, giving people notice, those sorts of things. And so sometimes we want immediate satisfaction in a situation, but understanding that these are folks that really have everybody's best interest at heart, have the institution's best interest at heart, and the campus. So thank you all both for being here. Yeah. Dan, we do have a resolution coming out of the FITAC committee, which Dan has been working on this for quite a while from English and comparative literature, but this is about electronic issues. I'll put it like that. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Of course. Thank you, Mimi, and thank you for representing the faculty so much. Thank you, Jill and Helena, as well, for facilitating this. A little bit of background. In 2021, almost a little over 2 years ago, you may have gotten an email. If you're like me, you probably ignored a lot of it. It said My Analytics. If you opened it up, it would have some data charts in there. And it said time spent on Tuesday responding to emails and some bar graph, and time spent drafting emails on Wednesday, some bar graph. And this was produced by Office 365, the platform sending us metrics about how we're doing at work. So at the Faculty Information Technology Advisory Committee, one of our members came to us and said, what's going on? This is bothersome to me. So we began a 2-year process of working through this. That process was a lot of discovery. We met with the Office of Legal Counsel, we met with the university archivist, we met with the employee forum, we met with the provost. We did a lot of research and found that the policies are in place in some instances. In some instances, the practices need to be codified. And in other instances, the policies need updating in many ways. We also discovered that there's so many instantiations of where a data policy might happen in a research space, a teaching space, one unit or another, and different levels of authority, and also an ongoing kind of sense to this, that it really needed to be a kind of campus-wide ongoing item that people pay attention to. And that's what led us to this resolution where we're trying to offer some principles. Our sense is that the principles will represent faculty values in many ways. They will also surface the concerns that we were able to discover over the last 2 years and hopefully act as a guide moving forward while the campus comes up with better ways to approach data. So that's the resolution in front of you. It has 4 big areas of concern. The first one has to do with transparency. And so those are statements related to how data is collected, who has access, how decisions are made and communicated. There are concerns related to protections or prohibiting surveillance. Those are statements limiting data use, like those performance metrics that I talked about, ensuring authorized protocols are followed, ensuring intellectual freedom. There's also some privacy and ownership concerns. So those are statements calling for demarcation of ownership of data, reaffirming faculty intellectual property retention and confirming limits on third-party uses of data. And then there's some educational concerns. Those are statements calling for documentation of practices and posting of policies with easy access and outreach and education. That's the gist of the resolution. And I guess I'd like to conclude by moving for your approval. And I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. So Professor Anderson has moved adoption of this resolution. Is there a second? Thank you. So the question before the group is whether to adopt resolution 2023-3 endorsing these principles for work-related data from FITAC. Is there any discussion or any questions? Anything? Okay, this could be easy. All right, so we're not going to do a roll call vote. We do have to take a vote in a way that I am able to document that we had a quorum in the hybrid environment. So what I'm going to do is ask everyone, wherever you are in the room or on the Zoom, to raise your hand, your virtual hand, please, if you're on the Zoom, if you possibly can. Raise it high, keep it up while we do a really quick count and I get an assessment, and Khadijah's going to take a screenshot. Okay, in the room, anybody in favor of this resolution? Raise those hands and keep them up high. Okay, we actually need a head count. So Helene, are you counting? I got 20, 21. 21. Okay. We got 21 in the room, and I'm going to say that it looks like we've got enough votes to pass on the Zoom. So anyone opposed to the resolution? Okay, those of you, everybody on Zoom, put your hands down now. Oh, no, put it back up. We didn't get the screenshot. I'm so sorry. It's better than a roll call, isn't it? Put your hand back up if you voted for it, please. And we'll wait for Khadijah to tell us that she has the screenshots this time. Okay, she's got it. All right, hands down, everybody on Zoom, please. Thank you. Oh, they're so good. Look how fast they're doing that. It's amazing. It's remarkable to watch. Okay.
He's going.
Yeah, I'm gonna wait for all of those hands to go down. Yeah. I agree. I think it passed, but we should call for people who want to vote no anyway. Is there anyone in the room who wants to vote against the resolution? Raise your hands up high. Anyone in the room? Okay. Anyone on Zoom want to vote against the resolution? I'm not counting you, Leisha and Meg, because I saw your vote in favor. Anyone else on Zoom want to vote against? Okay. The resolution passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Shall I continue with the rest of our business because it's committee reports?
Yes, but just let me just say, so Dan and his committee, that was 2 years of work. That's a lot to get to this place. So thank you very much for that. Yeah.
I agree. These committees are so important. I hope all of you who've been invited to run for committees will be delighted to serve, or if you get appointed. Okay, so the final thing, we are not going to do the report from the Honorary Degrees and Special Awards Committee today. We really just don't have the time, but we did receive reports from several of our committees. Some of them were rolled over from last month when we didn't have time to receive them. And so we do need to take a vote to accept those reports. I do want to provide an opportunity. Does anyone have any questions about any of the reports for the chairs of the committees that submitted the reports this month? Okay, going once, going twice on questions. Okay, so I'd like to do this by unanimous consent without objection. Is there any objection to receiving the reports by unanimous consent? Okay, the committee reports are received and we finished our business.
Go enjoy a beautiful evening, everyone. Thank you. Sorry. These little voting cards that are on your. Hello, the voting cards that are on your tables, please take them and pass them out in your respective areas to your colleagues to assist in having a robust participation in our upcoming election. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.